do we start digging into specifically what you found with those different things at this point, or is there something else we should be plugging in here?
That's fine. I mean, I'm happy to talk about some of those, testing those parameters in my attempt to make a cheat sheet. There are statistically significant differences, which is my most hated sentence as a scientist, honestly. I hate saying that, and I feel like I have to say it all the time. It's so terrible. So statistical differences exist. There are really common varieties and types that have consistency. So T90, as even though it contains the most green batter, was the most precise, and like the error bars, so the difference between the maximum and minimum, was the tightest on the T90, whereas everything else had really big error bars. And that tells me like maybe in cryo, that processing or something, they had a little bit more green matter in one of them than a different one. I don't know. Or whole leaf, sometimes you had a lot, sometimes you had a little. It's like, well, were they crushed in packaging? I don't know. So T90 provided the most consistent creep, as well as something like Mosaic. Sometimes Mosaic shot me the exact same number, which is insane, should not happen, but exact same number each time. And so super common variety, super common product type gives you consistent results. So I think that's great because most brewers are using T90. Maybe some other things, but most people are using T90. The other thing was that specific hop types and regions that are used in these hoppy styles were not different from each other. So even though they creeped the most, like T90 and cryo were in the same grouping, or South Pacific and Pacific Northwest were in the same grouping, they're not different from each other. So the thing that you're already using for IPAs is like similar enough that you could maybe expect the same amount of creep. So I think that's, even though it's frustrating because it keeps seeming like they're always on the far side of producing the most amount of creep, at least that hopefully they can be consistent and you can build like your tank timelines around that or something.
Sure.
And yeah, I tested varieties, and the interesting thing I found there was I had multiple years of Cascade, I think multiple growing regions of Mosaic, a couple of like repeat varieties that were different years or growing regions. And the cool thing was they ended up in the same end of the spectrum each time. So Cascade was super far over every time. But Mosaic, grown in two different locations, was also in the same area. So I think that's like kind of cool because we keep saying there's year to year differences, there's this difference, that difference, and there can actually be consistency found in those like details of repeated fermentations if you made the exact same wort,
Sure.
which is not always easy as a craft brewer, but
Sure.
we can try.
Sure.
So I think there's some cheat sheet things maybe in there, but it wasn't
Absolutely.
what I set out to look like, maybe.
Sure. And so you were finding, because sometimes people, I've heard some stuff said that maybe, there are some regions that grow hops that tend to contribute a little bit more to that. Can you paint with that wide of a brush when making a statement like that?
Well, I guess the way I divided my data, right? Like I decided these regions, which, it's just me saying Pacific Northwest.
Sure.
I could have taken that farther and said, okay, if it's grown in Washington, if it's grown in Oregon, if it's grown in Idaho, are there differences there? I chose not to go that minutia based. Sometimes I feel like a lot of small brewers don't have the opportunity for selection. They don't get to choose that their hop that came from Idaho has the most amount of creep, but that's what they're stuck with. So I didn't want to go that far into it, and I didn't want to blame specific farms or anything because I don't think it's the farmer's onus. But so I put it into things like Pacific Northwest and then Midwest because we have some Michigan grown hops and maybe there's a difference there. And then I did South Africa, South Pacific, Central Europe, and Western Europe, which is they're very broad regions, but we're choosing things in IPAs from Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Northwest, most likely, and the Midwest sometimes too. South Africa sometimes. We use everything, but no one is making
Sure.
a Hallertau Middle Fruit triple IPA, right? So that
Correct.
that guy being by itself in Group B, all the way separate,
Hmm.
it doesn't really matter
Sure.
in the grouping. So